Hello, my name is Peyton Young, and today I'm going to be talking about Kelly Stewart's play, The New New. Now, this play starts out with two characters, Jenny and Marcy, in their office doing mindless office work, stapling brochures, folding envelopes, I don't know. But anyway, they're sitting there and they're gossiping, which, I'm guilty of too, gossiping while I'm supposed to be doing my schoolwork, but I'm pretty sure our subjects were pretty different. I was probably talking about what boy I had a crush on or how hard the math homework was. But they're sitting here talking about a new man that their publishing company is taking on who happens to be a murderer. Okay, apparently it was self-defense, so technically manslaughter. But anyways, as they're talking about this new guy and how Marcy really wants Jenny to meet him, a new character named Naomi shows up. And so she's looking for Bradley Zuckerman, who's the publisher. Jenny and Marcy, they just ignore her. They hope she'll just go away. But whenever she doesn't, they repeatedly, dismissively ask her if she has an appointment, to which Naomi comes back with the same energy, just asking when he'll be back. They're overall very rude to her, but Naomi continues to stand and listen to their conversation as they act like she's not even there. Now, I'd probably do the same thing. I want to know what's so juicy that's making you ignore me, So they resume their conversation about Mr. Manslaughter, as I like to call him, but his name's actually Jimmy. And they're talking about what he writes about, jail, prison, penal system in general, his education. Apparently he has an MBA from Yale. And how the crime he committed was in fact self-defense, because the victim, who is nicknamed Monster, is 6'2" and 300 pounds. And I can imagine when someone that big is coming at you that you definitely want to fight back. Naomi, she becomes curious, as anyone would, and she asks who they're talking about. However, instead of giving her an answer, they just threaten to call security on her because in their minds, she's just another new author who wants to hand in her manuscript. So she hurriedly gets out of their sight, continuing on her trek to find Mr. Zuckerman. Meanwhile, in another room, this entire time, Bradley and Craig have been having a conversation about another word to use for new in the book's title, to catch more people's attention, because new is just so overused. And also about how Ben Stiller has the film rights. Now, this is definitely a dude conversation. I grew up with my father, my brother, and my grandfather all in the same house. So when they get together, they can talk about football or the weather for hours on end. So it really doesn't surprise me that these guys spent all this time flipping through a thesaurus. Back to the play, though. As they're having this conversation, Naomi walks in stating once again that she's looking for Bradley Zuckerman. Craig and Bradley decide to pull a little joke on her and say that Bradley isn't there, and ask if she would just like to leave him a message. She's reluctant at first and she just wants to wait for him, but she realizes that that's probably not the smartest idea, and so she takes a notepad that Craig hands her and furiously scribbles down a note for Bradley and gives it back to Bradley, unknowingly of course, and says that she wants him to make sure that Bradley gets this note. The men agree and then snicker to themselves after she leaves, pleased with their little prank. It then switches back to Jenny and Marcy, when Marcy tells Jenny that Jenny killed this drug dealer guy, and that she's really gonna like him. And, this kind of seems like an oxymoron to me. She's supposed to like a guy who's killed someone else. Especially a drug dealer. Obviously he's associated with these drug dealers, and they're violent drug dealers because obviously in self-defense he had to kill this guy. So, I'm flabbergasted. I don't think that I'd be able to like somebody who'd done something like that, but maybe that's just me. I'd be a little bit more than apprehensive to meet the guy. Never mind that, though. The play then shifts back to Bradley and Craig, where Bradley, in a very annoyed tone, asks what she wanted anyway, as he picks up her note and starts to read it. Now, the note states that her brother's name was Jeremy, not Monster. He was 5'3" and 130 pounds, not 6'2" and 300. He was tortured for 2 hours and strangled, and that Jimmy used the belt on him so forcefully that it left imprints on his neck. She goes on to say he was a medical assistant and a human being, not a monster. And she finishes the note by saying it kills her that Jimmy is profiting off of this whole situation of her brother being murdered, and that nobody even really knows the truth, and they think that her brother was just this big guy coming at Jimmy with all this force and angry intent, when in reality, Jimmy strangled this man to death, according to her. After Bradley is through reading it, Craig starts to stutter out excuses for Jimmy, saying that the spirit of the situation was maintained, and the book isn't actually about any actual criminal case, so there's no legal bounding to what she's saying or anything like that. And Bradley interrupts him and says, "You knew about this." And then they start having an excuse marathon, helping Craig defend Jimmy and trying to make themselves feel better about continuing to endorse him. I mean, Craig questions Naomi's legitimacy. He even says that she could have been anyone. She could have just been a random person off the street trying to, you know, stop this from happening or profit off of it herself, you know. And Bradley then states that he believes Jimmy's writing redeems him, and he's setting him up with his girlfriend's sister, who happens to be Jenny, and that he wouldn't do that if he didn't think that Jimmy was a good enough guy. And, you know, in this play, greed as a theme, it just hits me in the face like a ton of bricks. Not only were Bradley and Craig originally okay with endorsing somebody who did kill somebody else, drug dealer guy or not, he killed somebody, but they were also okay with it even after they had at least a testimony that it was a violent crime, not self-defense, as previously stated, from the victim's supposed sister, who honestly has nothing to gain by lying about this whole thing. And after hearing all this, all they can do is come up with as many excuses as possible for Jimmy's behavior so they still can profit off of it. So, I mean, honestly, this play represents, to me at least, the pull money can have on people and what they can decide that they can accept to still profit off of a situation and still make money and everything that they are willing to consider and still be okay with, you know. So that's all I got for y'all. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed it too, Alex.